At the age of 32, Ethan Crowe, a successful coffee shop owner in Seattle, receives a call from his mother, whom he hasn't seen in 25 years. She abandoned him as a child because he was an unwanted boy. Now she's begging for $30,000 to save the family. But when Ethan agrees to help, he discovers a shocking truth. His biological relatives have been plotting for years to swindle him out of his money. Can he find justice without losing himself? Ethan Crowe was wiping down the counter of his bustling Portland coffee shop, Crowe's Nest, when his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon in early April 2025, the kind of day where the rain tapped gently against the windows and the smell of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air. At 32, Ethan had built a small empire, 3 cozy cafes across the city, each one a testament to his grit and determination. He glanced at the screen, expecting a supplier or maybe his adoptive mom, Emily, checking in. Instead, an unknown number stared back at him. He hesitated, then swiped to answer. Hello. His voice was cautious, the hum of the espresso machine in the background. Ethan? Oh, thank God you picked up. The woman's voice trembled, laced with a desperation that made his stomach twist. It's Linda. You're your mother. The world seemed to tilt. Linda, his biological mother. The woman who'd given him up at 5 years old, who hadn't spoken to him in over 2 decades. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. He stepped behind the counter, away from the curious eyes of his barista, Mia, who was steaming oat milk for a latte. What do you want? He asked, his tone flat. He hadn't meant it to sound so cold, but the words came out that way anyway. There was a pause, a shaky breath on the other end. I know this is out of the blue, Ethan. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. It's about your sisters, Carrie and Jess. They're in trouble. We need help. I need help. Ethan's mind raced. Carrie and Jess, his older sisters, blurry figures from a childhood he'd spent years trying to forget. He leaned against the wall, the cool brick grounding him as memories flooded back uninvited. A cramped house in rural Oregon, the kind with peeling paint and a sagging porch. His father, Roy, a truck driver who was gone more than he was home. Linda, always tired, always bitter, working double shifts at a diner. And Ethan, the mistake, the third child they hadn't planned for, the boy they didn't want when they'd been hoping for another girl to round out their little trio. He could still hear Linda's voice from those early years, sharp and cutting. If I'd known it was a boy, I'd have ended it right then. She'd said it more than once, usually after a few beers, her words slurring into the humid summer air. Roy hadn't been much better, distant when he was around, harsh when he wasn't. Ethan had been too young to understand why they treated him like a burden, why his sisters got new shoes while he wore their hand-me-downs, why he slept on a cot in the corner while they shared a proper bed. But by 5, he'd figured out he wasn't wanted. Ethan, are you there? Linda's voice snapped him back to the present. Yeah, he said, swallowing the lump in his throat. What kind of trouble? It's money, she admitted, her voice dropping. We're drowning. Roy lost his trucking gig a while back, and I can't keep up with the bills. The girls, they had to drop out of community college. We owe people, Ethan. I hate asking, but we need $15,000 just to get by. $15,000. Ethan almost laughed. He could afford it. His cafes were doing well, and he'd saved a decent chunk over the years. But the audacity of it, after all this time, lit a spark of anger in his chest. You haven't called me in 27 years, Linda. Not once. And now you want money. I know, she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. I'm sorry, Ethan. I wanted to reach out so many times, but things were complicated. We were so young, so broke. Giving you up, it was the hardest thing we ever did. But look at you now. You're doing so well. Roy ran into Tom the other day, your adoptive dad, and he told us about your coffee shops. We're proud of you, honey. The mention of Tom made Ethan's jaw clench. Tom and Emily, the couple who'd taken him in when he was 5, who'd turned a scared, angry kid into the man he was today. They'd given him a real home, a tiny apartment above their food truck, sure, but it was warm and safe. They'd worked tirelessly to send him to school, cheered at his college graduation, and cried tears of joy when he opened his first cafe. Linda and Roy didn't get to claim pride for that. They didn't get to call him honey. Why now? He pressed, his voice low. Why not 10 years ago? Or 5? Why does it take you being broke to remember I exist? Linda sighed, a sound heavy with exhaustion. I don't expect you to understand. We made mistakes, Ethan, but you're our son. Your sisters, they're family. They need you. We need you. He He didn't respond right away. The word family hung in the air, bitter and hollow. His real family was Emily and Tom, the people who'd raised him when Linda and Roy decided he was too much trouble. He thought of the day they'd handed him over, a blurry memory of Roy driving him to a neighboring town, dropping him off with a pat on the back and a curt, "Be good. No te has? No vuelvais." Just relief in their eyes as they drove away. "I'll think about it," he said finally, his voice tight. "I've got to go." "Wait. Ethan, please," Linda said, desperation creeping back in. "Can we meet? Just to talk? Me, Roy, the girls. We'd love to see you. Catch up. Please." He rubbed a hand over his face, the weight of the request pressing down on him. "I'll let you know," he muttered, then hung up before she could say more. The cafe buzzed around him. Mia, chatting with a regular, the clink of cups, the hiss of a steamer. But Ethan felt detached, like he was watching it all through a fog. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and stared out the window at the drizzle coating the streets. Linda's voice echoed in his head, stirring up a mix of guilt, anger, and something he couldn't quite name. He didn't owe them anything, not after what they'd done. But the idea of his sisters suffering, even if they'd never been close, gnawed at him. He thought of calling Emily and Tom, getting their take. They'd always been his anchor, the ones who'd taught him what family really meant. But part of him didn't want to burden them with this, not yet. For now, he'd sit with it, let it simmer. Because deep down, he knew this call wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something messy, something that might unravel everything he'd worked so hard to build. And as the rain picked up outside, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Linda's plea was less about help and more about control. Ethan Crowe sat in the dimly lit corner of the Rusty Anchor, a swanky Portland restaurant with exposed brick walls and overpriced cocktails. It was Friday evening, 3 days after Linda's call, and the air buzzed with the chatter of well-dressed patrons. He'd agreed to meet his biological family here, against his better judgment, because Linda had insisted it'd be neutral ground. Neutral, sure, but the place screamed extravagance, and Ethan couldn't help but wonder who'd be footing the bill. He adjusted his jacket, feeling out of place despite his success, and checked his phone. 6:58 p.m. They'd be here any minute. The door swung open, and there they were, Linda, Roy, Carrie, and Jess, striding in like they owned the joint. Linda spotted him first, her face breaking into a wide, practiced smile. She looked older than he'd imagined, mid-50s, with lines etched deep around her mouth and eyes, her hair a faded blonde. Roy trailed behind, his broad shoulders slouched, his trucker cap swapped for a cheap button-up shirt that strained at the buttons. Carrie and Jess, now in their late 20s, followed close, their outfits flashy and mismatched, tight dresses and knockoff designer bags that screamed trying too hard. "Ethan!" Linda rushed over, arms outstretched. He stood stiffly as she pulled him into a hug, her perfume sharp and cloying. "Oh, my boy, look at you. So handsome. So grown." Roy clapped him on the shoulder a little too hard. "Good to see you, kid. Heard you're a big shot now." Carrie and Jess chimed in with squeals, each hugging him in turn. "You like, famous around here, right?" Carrie said, twirling a strand of her dark hair. Jess nodded, her eyes darting around the restaurant. "Yeah, these cafes of yours. We've seen them everywhere." Ethan forced a tight smile, gesturing to the table. "Let's sit." His voice was clipped, but they didn't seem to notice or care. As they settled in, he pulled his phone halfway out of his pocket, thumbing the record button discreetly. Something told him he'd need evidence of whatever this was about to become. The waiter appeared, and before Ethan could even open the menu, Roy waved a hand. "Bring us the best stuff you got. My son's treating us tonight. He's got the cash for it." He grinned at Ethan, a glint in his eye that wasn't pride but something greedier. Ethan's stomach sank. "I didn't say I was paying," he said evenly, but Linda laughed it off, patting his arm. "Oh, don't be silly. We're family. You've done so well. We're just so proud." Her tone was syrupy, rehearsed. The waiter hesitated, then nodded and left to fetch the order. The conversation started light. Linda asking about his cafes, Carrie and Jess gushing about how cool it was to have a brother who'd made it. But Ethan wasn't buying the act. He watched them closely, Roy's smirk as he leaned back in his chair, Linda's quick glances at the menu's priciest items, the way his sisters kept checking their phones like they were waiting for something. Then it came. "So," Linda said, sipping a $20 glass of wine she'd ordered without asking. "About that help we mentioned, the girls really need it. Ethan. College didn't work out. Money's tight. You know how it is. Yeah. Carrie jumped in, pouting. I had to drop out 'cause Dad couldn't pay. It's been so hard. Jess nodded, her voice whiny. Same. We just want to get back on track, but we can't without like a little boost. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. How much are we talking? 15 grand, like you said on the phone. Linda's eyes lit up, but she masked it with a sigh. That'd cover it. Tuition, some debts. It's been rough, Ethan. We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. He nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then, casually, he asked, Why'd you drop out, though? What happened? Carrie froze mid-sip, and Jess's gaze flicked to Linda, who jumped in too fast. Oh, you know life. Jobs dried up, rent went up. They tried so hard, but... Actually, Roy cut in, chuckling. These two couldn't hack it. Partied too much, skipped classes. But hey, they're young. They deserve a second shot, right? The table went quiet. Carrie glared at Roy, and Jess's face flushed red. Ethan raised an eyebrow, piecing it together. So, not money trouble. You just didn't show up. Linda's smile faltered. That's not the point. They're your sisters, Ethan. Family helps family. Family, he echoed, his voice low. The word stung, and he felt that old anger bubbling up, the kind he'd buried deep after years with Emily and Tom. He took a slow breath, keeping his cool. Funny you say that now. Roy leaned in, his tone shifting to something harder. Look, kid, you turned out fine. Better than fine. We did you a favor, letting you go to that nice couple. Now you've got all this. He gestured vaguely at the restaurant, and we're just asking for a little back. What's the big deal? Ethan's jaw tightened. A favor. They'd dumped him like trash, and now they were rewriting history. He glanced at his phone, still recording, and decided to push. So this $15,000, it's for school or something else? Linda waved a hand. School, bills, whatever. Point is, we need it. You've got plenty to spare, don't you? Before he could answer, the food arrived: steaks, lobster, truffle fries, a spread that easily topped $200. Roy dug in, grinning. See? This is what I'm talking about. You're a big man now, Ethan. Time to share the wealth. Carrie giggled, snapping a photo of her plate. Gotta post this. My brother's treating us right. Ethan watched them, his appetite gone. The way they laughed, the casual entitlement. It wasn't desperation. It was a grift. He caught Jess whispering to Carrie, told you he'd cave, and Linda shushing her with a smirk. His blood ran cold. This wasn't a family reunion. It was a setup. Excuse me, he said abruptly, standing. Bathroom. He grabbed his phone and stepped away, heart pounding. In the quiet of the hallway, he replayed the last minute of the recording. Jess's whisper, Linda's laugh, Roy's share the wealth line. It was all there, clear as day. Back at the table, they barely noticed his return, too busy gorging themselves. Ethan sat, forcing a neutral expression. So, he said, cutting into his untouched steak, you really think I owe you? Linda looked up, mid-bite, and smiled. Not oh, honey. It's just right. You're doing so well, and we're struggling. That's all. He nodded, letting her words hang. The bill came, $287.50, and Roy slid it toward him without a word. Ethan stared at it, then pulled out his wallet. Fine, he said, tossing his card down. This one's on me. Their faces lit up, triumphant, smug. But as the waiter walked away, Ethan's mind was already racing. He'd paid, sure, but he wasn't done. That recording was his ace, and he'd play it when the time was right. For now, he'd let them think they'd won, because if they wanted to play this game, he'd make damn sure they lost. Ethan Crowe drove home from the rusty anchor in silence, the Portland skyline blurring past his windshield as the rain streaked down. It was just past 9 p.m., and the $287.50 dinner bill still burned in his mind. Not the money itself, but the gall of it all. His biological family's smug faces lingered like a bad aftertaste. Linda's fake tears, Roy's greedy grin, Carrie and Jess giggling over their lobster like they'd hit the jackpot. And that recording, tucked safely in his phone, replayed in his head, Jess's whispered, told you he'd cave, Linda's shushing smirk. It wasn't just about the money. It was about control, about them thinking they could waltz back into his life and take what he'd built. He pulled into the driveway of his modest bungalow, a cozy two-bedroom he'd bought after his third cafe took off. The lights were on. Emily and Tom were inside, probably sipping tea and watching some old sitcom rerun. Ethan had called them earlier, asking if they could come over. He needed their steady presence, their wisdom, to sort through the mess in his head. As he stepped through the door, the smell of chamomile and the faint sound of laughter greeted him. "Ethan," Emily called from the living room, her graying hair pulled into a loose bun. She stood, her small frame wrapped in a cardigan, and hugged him tight. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Tom." "Feels like it," he muttered, dropping his keys on the counter. Tom, a wiry man with a salt and pepper beard, muted the TV and leaned forward in his recliner, his sharp eyes studying Ethan. "Spill it," Tom said, his voice gruff but warm. "What did they do?" Ethan sank onto the couch, running a hand through his dark hair. He told them everything. The call from Linda, the dinner, the $15,000 ask, the way they'd ordered the priciest dishes like it was his duty to pay. He played the recording, watching their faces shift from curiosity to disbelief. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line, and Tom's jaw tightened. "Those leeches," Tom growled when it finished. "They didn't give a damn about you back then, and they don't now. They're just sniffing around because you've got something they want." Emily reached for Ethan's hand, her touch gentle but firm. "I'm proud of you for keeping your cool, sweetheart. But be careful. People like that, they don't stop unless you make them." "I know," Ethan said, staring at the floor. "But part of me, I don't know, feels guilty, I guess. What if the girls really are struggling? What if I'm just being selfish?" "Selfish?" Tom snorted. "You built this life from nothing, Ethan. We gave you a start, sure, but you're the one who put in the work. They don't get to claim that. Or you." Emily nodded. "Guilt's natural, hon. You got a big heart. But don't let it blind you. They're playing on that, and you deserve better." He exhaled, the weight of their words settling in. They were right. He knew it, but the tug-of-war in his chest wouldn't quit. He'd spent years burying the pain of being unwanted, building a new family with Emily and Tom. Yet here was Linda, dredging it all up, making him question himself. He hated that she still had that power. The next morning, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, coffee in hand, digging into his biological family story. He wasn't ready to confront them again. Not yet, but he needed answers. He started with social media, scrolling through Carrie and Jess's profiles. Public posts showed them at bars, flashing new clothes and cocktails, not a hint of struggle. A quick search of Roy's name turned up a trucking forum where guys griped about him. Apparently, he'd been fired 2 years back for missing runs, not downsizing like Linda claimed. Linda's trail was thinner, but a cousin's offhand comment on Facebook caught his eye. "Tired of Aunt Linda asking for cash every Christmas. When's she gonna learn?" Ethan leaned back, the pieces clicking. This wasn't a one-off plea. It was a pattern. He called an old high school buddy, Mike, who'd stayed in their hometown and still knew the gossip. After some small talk, Mike confirmed it. "Yeah, man, Roy and Linda V been mooching off folks for years. Borrowed from my uncle once. Never paid him back. They're always broke, but somehow they got a new TV every time I drive by." The revelation hit Ethan like a punch. They weren't desperate. They were grifters. And he was their latest mark. But then his phone buzzed. A letter slid under his door while he'd been on the call. He grabbed it, heart sinking as he recognized Roy's scrawl on the envelope. Inside, the note was short and ugly. "You owe us, Ethan. We gave you life, and you're sitting pretty while we rot. $15 KS nothing to you. Don't make this hard, or we'll come take what's ours." No signature, but the threat was clear. Ethan's hands shook as he set it down. Anger flared, hot and sharp, but fear crept in too. What'd it take what's ours mean? His money? His cafes? His peace? He snapped a photo of the letter and texted it to Emily and Tom, who replied instantly, "Call a lawyer." Now, he did. His attorney, Sarah, a no-nonsense woman he'd hired for business contracts, listened as he explained everything. The dinner, the recording, the letter. "This is coercion," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Not enough for a restraining order yet. No direct violence, but it's a start. Keep documenting. If they escalate, we got a case." Ethan hung up, his mind racing. He could send the money and be done. $15,000 wasn't worth this headache. But that'd just invite more demands, more threats. No, he wouldn't cave. Not this time. He thought of Emily's warning. They don't stop unless you make them. And Tom's blunt truth. You don't owe them a damn thing. By noon, he made up his mind. He wouldn't just sit there, waiting for their next move. He'd fight back. Smart, legal, and final. The recording was his weapon, the letter his shield. He didn't know how far they'd push, but he'd be ready. Because if Linda and Roy thought they could guilt him into submission, they were about to learn how wrong they were. As he locked the letter in his desk drawer, Ethan felt a shift, not just anger but resolve. This wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about protecting the life he'd built, the family he'd chosen. And if they wanted a war, he'd give them one they couldn't win. Ethan Crowe stood in his office at Crowe's Nest, the flagship cafe, staring out at the drizzle-soaked Portland street. It was Monday morning, a week after Roy's threatening letter had slid under his door, and the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. His desk was a battlefield of evidence. The recorded dinner conversation, the scrawled note, screenshots of Carrie and Jess's lavish social media posts, and a stack of notes from his call with Mike. Ethan wasn't just angry anymore. He was focused. Linda and Roy had picked the wrong mark, and he was ready to hit back, hard and legal. His lawyer, Sarah, sat across from him, flipping through the pile with a sharp eye. She was in her late 40s, all business in a crisp blazer, her dark hair pulled back tight. "This is solid," she said, tapping the letter. "Coercion, implied threats, enough to build a case. The recording's gold, too. Oregon's a one-party consent state, so it's admissible. We can't prove physical danger yet, but emotional distress? Fraudulent intent? That's where we'll nail them." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "I don't want money from them. They don't have any. I just want them gone. Out of my life for good." Sarah smirked. "Then we go for a cease and desist first. Scare them into backing off. If they don't, we escalate to a civil suit. Emotional distress, attempted fraud, maybe even harassment if they keep pushing. You got the upper hand here, Ethan. They're sloppy." "Sloppy's an understatement," he muttered, thinking of Roy's smug grin at dinner, Linda's fake tears. "What's the next step?" "I draft the letter today," Sarah said, scribbling a note. "We demand they stop all contact. No calls, no visits, no more guilt trips, or face legal action. We'll hint at the evidence without showing our full hand. Send it certified mail, so they can't deny receiving it. If they violate it, we've got grounds for more." Ethan exhaled, a mix of relief and nerves washing over him. Do it. By Wednesday, the cease and desist was mailed, and Ethan felt the first flicker of control. He threw himself into work, pouring lattes, tweaking the spring menu, trying to keep his mind off the waiting game. Emily and Tom checked in daily, their support a lifeline. "You're doing the right thing," Emily said over the phone that night, her voice soft but firm. "They don't deserve you, hon." Friday brought the twist. Ethan was closing up the cafe when his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think a fancy letter scares us? We'll get what's ours, one way or another." No name, but the tone screamed Roy. Ethan's pulse spiked. He forwarded it to Sarah, who called within minutes. "They're digging their own grave," she said, almost gleeful. "This is a direct violation. I'm filing the suit tomorrow. Emotional distress and attempted extortion. We'll subpoena their financials, too. If they've been grifting others, it'll show." Ethan agreed, but the threat gnawed at him. What if they showed up at his house? His cafes? He installed a security camera at home that night, just in case, and warned his staff to call him if anyone sketchy lingered. The next day, Sarah filed the paperwork, and the legal machine roared to life. The courtroom showdown came faster than he'd expected. 2 weeks later, a small civil hearing in a Portland courthouse. Ethan sat in a stiff suit, Sarah beside him, as Linda, Roy, Carrie, and Jess shuffled in across the room. They looked disheveled. Roy in a wrinkled shirt, Linda clutching a cheap purse, the girls whispering nervously. No lawyer, just them, like they thought they could charm their way out. The judge, a stern woman with gray streaks in her hair, peered over her glasses as Sarah presented the case. The recording, the letter, the text, testimony from Mike about their history of mooching. Ethan took the stand, voice steady as he recounted the dinner, the guilt trips, the threats. "They abandoned me at 5, he said, locking eyes with Linda. "Now they think I owe them because I made something of myself. I just want peace." Linda stood next, tears welling up on cue. "We're his family, Your Honor. We made a tough choice back then, but we love him. He's twisting this. We just needed help." Roy followed, gruff and defensive. "Kid's got money to burn. What's wrong with helping your own blood?" Then came the shock. Sarah called Carrie and Jess as witnesses, subpoenaed, forced to testify. Under oath, Carrie cracked first, her voice trembling. "Mom and Dad told us to play it up, say we were broke, make him feel bad. We didn't even want to go back to school. They said he'd pay if we pushed hard enough." Jess nodded, avoiding Ethan's gaze. "They've been borrowing from everyone, cousins, neighbors. Said Ethan was our big score. The room went silent. Linda's face crumpled, and Roy slammed a fist on the table, earning a sharp gavel bang from the judge. "Order," she snapped, then turned to Sarah. "Counselor, you're closing?" Sarah stood, calm and cutting. "The defendants have exploited my client's success with lies and threats. This isn't family, it's a con. We asked for damages and a permanent no-contact order." The judge deliberated for 10 tense minutes, then ruled. "I fine for the plaintiff. The defendant's actions show clear intent to deceive and distress. I award Mr. Crowe $20,000 in damages for emotional harm, to be paid by the defendants jointly. Further contact is prohibited. Violation will result in contempt charges." Case closed. Ethan exhaled, the weight lifting as Linda sobbed and Roy cursed under his breath. They had no money to pay. He knew that, but the order was what mattered. Sarah clapped him on the back as they left the courtroom. "They're done, Ethan. You won." Outside, the rain had stopped, and the sky was clearing. Ethan called Emily and Tom from the steps, voice shaky with relief. "It's over. They can't touch me." Tom chuckled. "Damn right. Proud of you, son." Emily's voice was warm. "Come over tonight. We'll celebrate. You, us, the real family." Ethan smiled, the first real one in weeks. He'd fought, not with fists or vengeance, but with truth and the law. Linda and Roy had lost their grip, exposed for what they were. As he drove home, the victory sank in. Not just the ruling, but the freedom. They'd underestimated him, and now they'd pay the price. Ethan Crowe stood on the freshly paved patio of Emily's Brew, his newest cafe, watching the late April sun dip below Portland's skyline. It was opening day, 2 weeks after the courtroom victory, and the air buzzed with chatter, the clink of mugs, and the rich aroma of roasted coffee. The sign above the door bore Emily's name in elegant script, a tribute to the woman who'd raised him, and inside, a framed photo of her and Tom hung behind the counter. This wasn't just a business. It was a promise kept, a celebration of the family he'd chosen over the one that had discarded him. The legal dust had settled fast. The judge's ruling, $20,000 in damages and a permanent no-contact order, had slammed the door on Linda, Roy, Carrie, and Jess. Ethan knew they'd never pay. Their finances were a mess, a tangle of unpaid loans and bad credit. Sarah, his lawyer, had confirmed it with a quick records check. They're broke, Ethan. That $20,000 might as well be $1 million to them. He didn't care about the money. The win was in the silence. No more calls, no more threats, just peace. That morning, he made a decision. He met Sarah at her office, the check for his legal fees already written. "File the paperwork to waive the damages," he said, sliding an envelope across her desk. "I'm donating it instead, to a local charity for foster kids. They need it more than I do." Sarah raised an eyebrow, then smiled. "Classy move. I'll handle it. You're free and clear now. Enjoy it." By noon, the donation was done. $20,000 to Portland's New Roots program, helping kids like he'd been, abandoned, scared, but full of potential. The director had called, voice thick with gratitude. "This'll fund scholarships, Ethan. You have no idea what it means." He did, though. He'd lived it. Now, as the cafe filled with regulars and friends, Ethan felt lighter than he had in months. Emily and Tom moved through the crowd, beaming. Emily, in a floral dress, hugged every third person, while Tom, ever the gruff softy, handed out free scones and muttered, "Don't eat 'em all now." They'd retired their food truck years ago, but this, seeing their namesake thrive, lit them up like kids again. Mia, his head barista, sidled up, nudging him with an elbow. "Boss, you gonna make a speech or what? People keep asking how you pulled this off so fast." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "Nah, no speech. Just thanks to them." He nodded at Emily and Tom. "They're the real story." But the story wasn't quite over. As the evening wore on, Ethan stepped outside for air, leaning against the brick wall. His phone buzzed, a local number he didn't recognize. He hesitated, the old paranoia flaring, then answered. Ethan Crowe, a woman's voice, tentative but familiar. "It's Carrie." His stomach dropped. "What do you want?" he asked, voice hard. "You're breaking the order." "No, wait," she cut in, rushed. "I'm not with them. I moved out, got a job at a warehouse. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. Mom and Dad, they pushed us, but I shouldn't have gone along. I didn't know how bad it got for you." Ethan stayed silent, processing. Carrie sounded different, scared, maybe sincere. Why now, he finally asked. I saw the cafe opening online, she said. Heard about the donation. It hit me. You're not who they said you were. They lied about you, about us. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm trying to do better. He exhaled, the anger softening but not gone. Good for you, Carrie. But we're done. Don't call again. He hung up, staring at the screen. Part of him wanted to believe her, but trust was a bridge too far. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Back inside, Emily caught his eye, her brow furrowing. You okay, hon? Yeah, he said, forcing a smile. Just tying up loose ends. She squeezed his arm. You got us. That's what counts. The night wound down, and after the last guest left, Ethan locked up with Emily and Tom beside him. They walked to their car, Tom grumbling about the late hour, Emily laughing at his fake complaints. Ethan lingered, watching them go, then turned back to the cafe. The sign glowed softly in the dark, a beacon of what he'd built. Not just a business, but a life. The next day, he got a call from New Roots. They named a scholarship after him, the Crowe Fund, for kids aging out of foster care. You're giving them a shot, Ethan, the director said. A real future. He hung up, a lump in his throat. That was the win. Not the courtroom, not the money, but this. He'd turned their greed into something good, something lasting. Linda and Roy might never change, but they'd lost their power over him. Carrie's call lingered, a faint echo, but it didn't shake him. He'd moved on. Weeks later, Ethan sat with Emily and Tom at their kitchen table, a Sunday ritual of pancakes and coffee. Tom flipped the newspaper open, grunting. Says here some folks got busted for loan scams downtown. Sound familiar? Ethan smirked. Let me guess. Roy and Linda? Nah, not them, Tom said, but wouldn't surprise me if they're next. Karma's slow, but it catches up. Emily swatted Tom with a napkin. Enough gloom. Ethan's got better things ahead, like that new espresso blend he's hiding from us. Guilty. Ethan laughed, raising his mug. Next week's special. As they bantered, Ethan felt the final threads of tension unravel. The fight with his biological family had tested him, pushed him to the edge, but he'd come out stronger. He hadn't just won in court. He'd reclaimed his story. Linda and Roy could scheme all they wanted. They'd never touch this. The warmth of Emily's kitchen, Tom's gruff love, the life he'd earned. Outside, Portland hummed along, the rain a soft drumbeat on the roof. Ethan sipped his coffee, savoring the quiet victory. Justice wasn't loud or vengeful. It was this, a new day, a real family, and a legacy of good they couldn't taint. He made sure of it.